Today, we have three companies whose communications have either been submitted or we've encountered and feel would be a great subject for us to work through and share with you some opinions on how messaging can be improved to drive effective marketplace results. We've got a great panel, including myself, Ken Lempit, president of Austin Lawrence, Jason Myers, our chief revenue officer, and really heading up the marketing for Austin Lawrence itself. We have Rachel Crate, digital marketer, leading a lot of the advertising and content development efforts here at Austin Lawrence, and James Allerinshaw, an account director and strategic advisor to our clients, guy with more than 20 years experience in tech marketing, PR, also on the advisory side, having worked at Forrester Research. So let's dig right in. Jason, I'm going to give you the talking stick and we're going to get into our first case study.
Excellent. Well, let's jump right in. Okay, so the first one was Genus Technologies that gave us a submission here. A little bit different format. They gave us a letter, and this was a letter, you don't have to read this, but it was a letter that is meant for their internal customers. We did take a stab at rewriting this, and we'll show you what we came up with in a second. But first, let me start with what my comments were on this was that it immediately starts talking about them and not the customer or their issues. So starts, I wanted to provide you with a quick update. Some people are going to stop reading right there. So this applies both to sales messages and to internal messages. You want to make it about them, not you. So what's the biggest thing that we should be focusing on to get their attention? Remember, if you don't get their attention with the subject line, and in an email case, usually you've got preview text. You've got the subject and the preview text. That's your opportunity to get attention. If you miss that opportunity, people are just going to delete it. So it's really important. James, what were your comments on this letter?
Well, I'm glad you said we didn't have to read it because I don't
You
feel
don't want to
particularly
read it.
compelled. I don't want to read it. It's a big wall of text. Even if that upfront messaging about the customer and their problem was at the beginning, it's still just an awful lot to work through here. So I think that's kind of rather off-putting. Also, adding to that length is these very long links which haven't been integrated into, as hyperlinks into the text, which makes it just unnecessarily long. So yeah, I know we've worked up our version of this, and it'll be interesting to make the kind of comparison for ease of reading.
Rachel, do you want to comment on this or the end result?
Either or is fine, but I first of all agree so far with the comments that have been made, so I'm not going to repeat them. But I know that when I first read through it, it took me a minute to really even understand what was happening. It just is not very clear right off the bat, and I think that can happen when it's something that you're close to. So for you, it makes sense, but you need somebody who might not be as close to this to open the email right away and know exactly what they're getting into.
Ken?
Yeah, I'd say I always like email to give me few choices. It's almost like delivering a landing page. So, set me up, tell me why I should take an action, and give me one thing to click. And I think you'll have a lot more results here. There must be 6 or 7 links in this email, and I can't imagine they're all as important as the main call to action, which would probably be to get a demo. Let's have less. Less is more.
And the only other thing I would add before I go to our solution on it is if this is an outbound email, I wouldn't put any links in it. I'd even get rid of it in your signature line, and I would get rid of the links to your website. I would get rid of the logo. All of those things will hurt your deliverability if it's more cold. Since I didn't mark that because this is more of an internal customer, so I'm assuming that it's not going to get jammed up by spam filters. Although, because there are so many links and things like that, it does run that risk. So you want to be careful when you're sending out email correspondence with all these links in it. So here's kind of how we fixed it. And notice we put right in the subject, what is the problem that we're talking about? A hidden cost in ServiceNow that's draining budgets. So we're immediately talking about the problem as we are like a broken record on getting problem agreement. We think it's very important. And your ads, your web copy, your messages that go out, you should be speaking about the problem, especially if you've got a product that solves a complex business issue or something like that, where it's not immediately apparent about how if this is going to help me or not. It's really important to start talking about problems that you solve, because if you can attract people that agree that this is a problem, you've really won half the battle, because all you need to do from there is point out how the current solutions are insufficient, and then you can provide your reframe, which is how we're solving the problem differently. And so that's kind of how we're looking at how to fix this. And so we're talking about now a hidden cost. You may not have even known about that. But it's intriguing, and it's starting to get problem awareness that, hey, if you have service now, it could be costing me more. So does that intrigue you enough to look at the email? I hope so. James?
I think it's the psychology of how people look at this information. We're all overwhelmed, with content, with emails, with advertising, social media. And yet we still have the ability to kind of scan through that information very rapidly and zero in on things that we think are relevant for us. So whilst the models for email marketing are very challenging, almost broken these days, I think a well-written, carefully targeted message with strong problem agreement with your target audience can still cut through. And so I think the work that you did here, Jason, just to kind of really put that problem in the subject line, really simplify the message, and just make the whole thing a lot shorter to read, gives this email a lot greater chance of being successful.
Speaking about shorter too, like one of the things, it was hard to fit it all on the screen if you do this, but when you're sending out an email, you should do a lot of paragraph breaks so that the lines show up like almost as individual sentences. It's much easier to read, and somebody can skim it a lot better that way.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I like that we have the links now behind the text, right? So there's the hyperlink isn't fully revealed, not necessary. I also like a little bit of icons to help point the reader where we might want them to go. And we have fewer places for them to click. Also, I think really important. The subject is, I agree, intriguing. I want to know what my hidden costs might be. And we have a solution. So I think it's a lot tighter of an email than it was. Probably much more likely if you A/B tested this, I'm sure it would do very well, especially with what I consider, from my vantage point, younger IT decision makers who would prefer to read this amount of text versus what was in there before.
Rachel?
Yeah, definitely. It's very clear. Basically, that first sentence right there is summarizing the 3 or 4 that it took to get to that point in the original copy. And we've got
Right.
that pretty succinct right off the bat. Okay, here's what's happening, right? But we're getting into how we're addressing it. And I think that in the original copy, there was probably a desire to emphasize that we're doing something to fix this problem from the start, which is why it started in that way. But this just is organized in a way now that makes sense and it's less cognitive load. It's less confusing to try to parse through all the information. So it still says the same thing, but formatted in a way that's just simpler to chew through and understand.
Exactly. Well, let's take a look at their website, which is this page. So there's a lot of issues that I have with a lot of the messaging here as well. So I'm going to start off with the main tagline, empowering business operations with intelligent process and content automation. So my first question is, what does that mean? That's a problem if you've got a prospect coming to your website and they've got a problem that they have to solve. Their immediate question is, can this company solve my problem? And does this headline answer that, or subhead answer that question? My answer is emphatically no, it does not. And then therefore, you are going to lose some people because of that. They're just not going to dig any further into the site. So if you're okay with that, don't change it. James?
This is the hardest bit of copy, the hardest part of your marketing design, that hero section at the top of a website. It's especially difficult when you have a business which does more than one thing. I'm not sure of the full range of services that Genus Technologies offers, but there's more than one. And so it's hard to zero in, on something when you want to speak to multiple people with multiple stories. But the solution to that is not something that is so general as to become meaningless. And so it really requires a lot of thinking to figure out what is the right message that's going to find problem agreement across your target audiences, intrigue people to click further and go into the next stage down, which is going to be more relevant to them. It's hard to do, but that is the art of messaging. And so, as Jason, as you said here, the language in this headline is just too general. It doesn't tell me enough about what the company's doing and what it's doing, more importantly, for me as a potential customer. So I think that's the message I'd have here, is to really spend some time thinking through what's going to work for the broad target audience that you're trying to address.
Yeah. And it's maybe an exercise you've heard of before, but a way that maybe you can get there is play the yes and game. Got empowering business operations with intelligent process and content automation. Yes, and okay, like, all right, cool. But what else? And just keep digging deeper into this, and you'll get to that specific thing eventually that you want to put here on the hero that speaks to everyone in a way that's not as vague as we've been talking about here.
You could also call it the so what.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, it has lots of variations.
Meaner, but yeah.
So I think this company is actually a relatively straightforward proposition, and they're hiding the goods down below in the website. And the fact is, this is a document automation company. They're document processing. They're building workflows around digital documents, and they engage with certain pieces of software like ServiceNow. That's part of their technology suite that they support. So this could be made a lot more apparent where people start and often finish right up here in the homepage hero. So I think we have one of the guys from the company here on the webinar, and I think just there's a section of the website down below that says, what do we do? Intelligent document automation, content services, and process transformation. Those three things work to solve a problem, which is that paper can overwhelm your business process, right? Digital and physical paper, processing that is costly, time consuming, and error prone. And there are ways to make that business a lot more effective, your business, if you have that problem. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I think they're close. Maybe they just need to reorder where elements appear on the website.
Great. Let's look at the next one, which is Ripple Science. So here's their website. When we were discussing this before the call, we noticed that the screen is going to be different based on the browser that you're looking at. So that's part of the reason that you're seeing the text appear over the person. Although, given other formats, it's still not formatting very correctly. And I mean, it's just impossible to read. So why are we making this text impossible to read? That doesn't do you any favors. Beyond that, the tagline or the headline itself is, I guess it's descriptive of who it's for and what it is. It's clinical trial software. Okay. And it's for CROs and sponsors to recruit and engage and retain research participants. But the problem is that, and I'm assuming that this is somewhat of a competitive space. So immediately, why you over the competitors? And this doesn't answer that at all. So again, if we were talking about the problem, then we're attracting people that agree with the problem. So whatever it is around clinical trial software where they're deficient today to solving a problem, that's where your differentiation comes in. James?
Yeah, I think we can sometimes on these conversations sound like a stuck record when it comes to problem agreement, but it really is the most important thing. Either you have a situation where your customers aren't aware that they have a problem that you can solve for them, in which case you've got to have problem awareness and drive some market education, or that they do have problem awareness and you need to position yourselves as being the best at solving that problem for them. As you say, Jason, this language here on the website, it does kind of explain what Ripple does, but it doesn't really tell me anything about why them, and why me as the buyer would want to choose them over a competitor. The other part of the problem here is, this is why having some art direction and some design is really worth investing in. The way in which this website displays, you see here from a desktop and on a mobile interface, it just makes it very hard to read. With a wider display on a desktop website, that text starts to kind of move over to the left and becomes easier to read. And so I can imagine that when this was being built, the people at Ripple looked at it and it all looks fine, but you need to have some testing take place. And that's what some art direction or a designer will give you to make sure that you are getting the look that you want, the look and feel that you want across multiple devices that all have different screen resolutions. It can be a tricky thing to get right, but it's definitely possible. Websites can do that for you. And so I'd recommend just a little bit of investment in that design.
Yeah, I won't spend too much time commenting on the design since I don't really have anything extra to add that we haven't already discussed. But I do want to point out the mobile experience. I'm not sure if Ripple has done the research to see how many people, like where they're visiting you. Are they on mobile? Are they on desktop? But you might be surprised to find that there's more on mobile than you might anticipate. And it's worth giving them a good experience as well. And I think, when I opened this and saw this, it was kind of surprising, but it can be an afterthought almost because it looks good on desktop. You expect it to translate well. And you have to consider both options because also now we have this headline that I think, again, we have the burying the lead here where we have our recruitment engagement software Ripple gives you effortless time management, time to focus on the patient. That's the benefits. That's the stuff you should be highlighting at the top. But now I'm on mobile and I have this big block of text that we're almost there. I feel like it's starting to get to where it needs to be, but it's not quite where it needs to be yet. And this is all I'm seeing. I might not be bothered to scroll down and kind of try to figure it out. People don't like thinking. They don't want to have to do work when they get to your site. So don't make them do work, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have to understand that very little of our traffic coming to our website is going to be purely organic, right? We're going to be driving the traffic to our website from our sales and marketing activities, events we attend, our social media that we post about. And people are going to arrive on our homepage, and the hero is where they're going to start and unfortunately too often end their journey. So this is worthy of a lot of thinking, both in terms of the content, imagery, and the choices we offer. So here we have a lot of choices. I think we've got 4 boxes in that image. We probably have one call to action that's most important to us. And I mean, it's really clear that this was a homegrown web presence. The person who built it was not a designer, nor art director, nor user experience person. And so the entire web experience is, I'd say, disconcerting. We have multiple typesets, the typography is inconsistent, the mobile or the responsive experience is unpredictable. And you mentioned, Rachel, on the mobile experience being kind of unsatisfying. The fact is, there's a mile of white space underneath that headline before you actually get to the content on mobile. So a lot of work to be done here. And it's unfortunate because I think it's a really cool company name. And the logo also could have been taken just a little bit further to be a little more exciting. So a lot of missed opportunity in an interesting space.
And one thing I'll add here too, according to Spiralize, that does a lot of analysis of large companies and their A/B tests, show that pictures of people or even videos in the headline do not perform as well as just a simple product shot. For some reason, that surprised me, but like people want to see what the product looks like front and center. So in a redesign, you might get rid of at least the picture of the lady and put it further down on the site. I'm not saying get rid of it completely, but the hero is just too important to mess around with.
Yeah, so headline, product image, call to action, that's your highest value, right?
Yep. And here's kind of further down on the site that you can see. And we put this here because we actually like this quote. It's starting to do what we would like in terms of problem agreement. It's not quite there, but having the quote from John Hopkins University that says, "We haven't found anything else like Ripple. it's a necessary tool for participant recruitment, tracking, and retention. So the only thing that I would add there is like specifically why, what was the problem that they were solving? But this is at least further on the right track.
Yeah, this is so compelling. It's a great quote. I'd love to know, yeah, what are those things that are distinct that George from John Hopkins has not been able to find it anywhere else? It's a superb quote from a really reputable institution. So recommend bringing that up top and identifying those unique characteristics, those unique features in Ripple that made this university a buyer. I think that's going to be much more powerful than just saying what the thing is, as we have in the current era.
On the second step of the process, right? Point out deficiencies and where they're trying to solve the problem today. This quote is starting to do that. So if we attract people that agree that this is a problem and then hit them with a quote from John Hopkins that says, we couldn't find anything else but Ripple to solve this problem, you're on your way to doing that exact formula. Rachel?
Yeah, my only real comment about this second part here is that we do love this quote, but can you put it higher up on the page?
All right.
Yeah, why not? It's great. It's social proof. Social proof is great to have, and I'm glad that it's here, but it doesn't hurt to put it up higher. Talk yourself up. You have people talking you up. Highlight that.
The only other thing I feel like this website suffers from what many do, which is we have many more buttons than necessary. There are 5 learn mores above this quote. And it's just like distracting, and it's another part of the design that's lacking. We could have 1 learn more under 5 icons and be a lot happier. Or give me a little explanatory text. Tell me why these things are important, and maybe pick 3 instead of 5. There's just a lot happening here, and it's zero added value, to be honest.
Yeah, Ken, thanks for pointing that out because I didn't even notice, but now that I see learn more 5 times right next to each other is an odd choice. You could keep all the buttons if you want all the buttons, but yeah, give us something different for each of them to say in there, or just put 1 at the bottom. I completely agree. Oh, and one more comment for our viewers, our participants. We will most likely have time to do Q&A. So if you have any questions for us related to anything we're talking about or, in general with this topic here, you can feel free to add them to the questions list. We'll do that at the end here.
Great. Let's go on to the next one, which is Zox.io. So here is their main web page. And so first thing that jumps out to me here is that there's a lot of text, especially this big paragraph here. The problem is I don't want to read that, right? Like Rachel said earlier, prospects are lazy. I don't want to read that. So we might try to shorten this. And there's a lot of fluffy text you can get rid of anyway. Also, the main message here, the AI meeting assistant made for financial advisors. Okay, so I know kind of what it is and who it's for, but why do I care? And this is particularly important because in this field, right, where this is a transcription service plus like workflow for calls, so like Otter or Fireflies, and that's just the point, is that there's a lot of these systems out there. Even Zoom is incorporating their own version of this now, where they have AI transcription. And this, when you look at the pricing on Zox, it's 3 times, almost 3 times more expensive than an Otter or a Fireflies or something like that. And so they need to make the case immediately for why this is a superior product for wealth managers. Otherwise, they're going to come to the site and they're going to say, well, why wouldn't I just use Fireflies? Or why wouldn't I just use Otter? It's a lot cheaper. It's doing the same thing. There's no text on the site that really differentiates them or gives them a reason as to why wealth managers should be looking at this tool versus everything else on the market. James?
I can only agree with you on that. If there's a much higher price for a very similar market position, you've really got to justify that. But I know in the prep session, we had some thoughts on the design. So I want to pass the talking stick to Ken so he can tell us what he thinks about the design. So I don't necessarily agree with him, but Ken, tell us what you think about the design.
Well, you just don't want to be unkind, so you're making it my job. But here, I'll take the talk. So if you look further into the Zox website and especially some of the other stuff we're going to look at, the color choices just don't make sense to me for a financial services technology product. It's just not consistent with how fintech players sort of present themselves. And I kind of likened their color palette to children's sidewalk chalk. It's like all these like very rich, bright pastel colors. And I'm just not sure that's consistent with how the financial advisory firms perceive themselves and the partners they want to select. Now, this firm has had some marketplace success, right? And you can see some evidence of that. They just closed a near $20 million Series A round in a tough environment. But what I would intuit from that is they're doing an awful lot of this on the back of sales effort. And it's almost in spite of some of the stuff we're seeing in their marketing and messaging. They're able to sell it, but maybe they could have an easier time of it if marketing was kind of driving the benefits home more, the differentiation, the problem solved. For example, I don't remember seeing anywhere here about a compliance play, which is really important for financial services firms. The RIAs that connect themselves with broker dealers have a compliance mandate, and we don't even see it here. Obviously, it must be somewhere, but it was pretty hard to find. So a lot of stuff about the design, I think could be improved. I like the hint toward the user interface, but I think a little more realistic representation of the user interface might actually make this a more productive homepage and website.
I don't necessarily disagree with you. You used the expression when we were talking earlier, money isn't funny. And I think that's true. I think for the most part, that when you're selling into financial products, even your most, I don't know, progressive buyer is probably quite conservative in that kind of decision. But certainly this is, B2B financial markets, capital markets, so financial advisors. So it's probably not an audience that's looking for fun. However, designs, it is a matter of taste. And I think there are examples out there of financial companies that have differentiated in their design. Back in 2000, Cooperative Bank in the UK launched the world's first internet bank, and it was called Smile. Still exists. And, it was, talk about money isn't funny. It was literally called Smile. They had a lot of fun with their iconography or design in that. So I think there are ways to stand out and look different. And maybe that's what these guys are trying to do here. And so the advice I would give to anybody in that is to do some market testing. It's very much easier these days to put out some variations in design and run some ads based on these different variations and get some data on how is the audience reacting, and then start to be led by some real insight rather than design opinion. I think there's sometimes it's personal preference can kind of come into this and sway us one way or another, and actually be really helpful to have some data from the target audience.
Geez, I'm not sure if you set me up or you just wanted a good straight man. I'm not sure which one it is.
Look, it's two different points of view, and as I say, I don't necessarily disagree with you. It's a little childish to look at. Maybe that can be effective. I would hesitate. I'd want some data that helps me know that. Do I want to be like navy blue and white, like all the rest of the financial services firms out there? Or do I want to, try and do something different? And if so, is that going to be effective for me? And that's the thing that's worth putting a little bit of effort into testing out. Let's say it's easy to do these days. Rachel, we've talked enough. Let's hand it on to you.
Sure thing. My comment is not on the visual, so we can, hopefully, thankfully, move
We
forward
said
from
enough about
here.
that.
So I know Jason touched on it a little bit with the headline here, and I'm not mad about the headline. I don't hate it. I don't think it's the worst that you could do here, because if I was a financial advisor looking for an AI meeting assistant, I'd see that right away. Okay, I know I'm in the right place. But I guess the question is more of where you're trying to, like, at what point in the process you're trying to attract people when they come to your site. Do they already know this is what they're looking for when they get here? Then all right. But if they're not entirely sure and they're doing the research on their own, which we've seen from different studies recently, that's what the majority of people are doing. They want to figure it out on their own, and then they'll come and talk to you. They'll ask for a demo, but they're going to do their own research. So if I know that I need something, but I'm not entirely sure what it is, I might just see the AI meeting assistant and say, all right, well, there's probably plenty of these. What about this is really special and different? What differentiates you from the rest? That put that in the headline.
Yeah, as I'm kind of reading this, I'm thinking there might be some differentiation here, which is all without recording client conversations. And I'm wondering if the difference is that there's compliance issues in this whole field that prevent marketers or sellers from recording the conversations. And if that's true, if that's the big differentiator, you got to really deal with that up at the top because that is your reason as a wealth advisor that I need to be looking at this over fireflies. Cuts the rest of the competition out. Before I move on to the ad, I also want to talk about it's confusing here to have these two buttons, start your free trial and book a demo. So when customers come to your website, overwhelmingly, they are not ready for a demo, or in other words, they're not ready to talk to sales. The starting a free trial is great. So I would be pushing people here in the hero, and I would move this book a demo up to the upper right hand corner where everybody else puts the button. And so the user knows where to find that button. So for the 1% of people that are ready for a demo when they come to the site, they know where to find it. But let's funnel everybody else into this starting a free trial because that starts to develop a relationship with them. Now you're going to see how the color scheme really impacts issues when you look at their ad. So this ad is a LinkedIn ad immediately, and because it's bigger on the screen, I can read it, but I guarantee if you're looking at this on a LinkedIn scroll, that does not show up very well at all. So we've got this very important quote, which is a pretty good quote. You know, Zox allows us to focus on the conversation with our clients without disrupting the flow to jot notes down. So that's part of the problem agreement that we're using our client to kind of justify for us. So that's a great approach. But the problem is, I don't want to read that because of the color scheme. It's not good on the eyes. James, what do you think?
Yeah, look, we've said a fair amount about the design. Color scheme aside, I think just the readability of the white text on this pastel green is hard to read, especially where that's like, the regular text, not bold. It's really not a lot of contrast. And so you're going to remember people are scrolling through on their phone most of the time, but also on their desktop. This is going to be small. And so make it easy for people to read the message. Whatever the message is, just don't make that hard work because people just move on.
Right. And going back to social proof, I love social proof. I think it's great to use it in an ad. It's a great testimonial quote here. I'd be curious to know how this is performing. I mean, we obviously don't have that information, so we have to go off of, whatever we might assume. If it's working well, then that's one thing, but it's the stopping power that we're talking about here. And again, it goes back to design, so I won't harp on that for everyone's sake. But I think the content is good. I can see you've got a great testimonial quote here, and in the copy at the top, we have some specific benefits and features and even the try it free for 30 days, why not throw that in there? That's another benefit. Like we were talking about before, people like to do their own research. They would probably just want to try it on their own before they even talk to you, book a demo. So, I mean, you seem to know that you put that in the hero, but I can see if it's not performing, I can see it performing better if we have that stopping power here visually. So that's the thing that is really lacking, in my opinion, here.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the layout here is actually really kind of intriguing. Great job on that. But there's got to be other stuff in the color palette that would offer more contrast with the knockout or white type. Even just inverting the colors so that the knockout came out of the purple would probably make it easier to read. And I think the sign up CTA, that's the one that stuck out at me. It's like, that's a big ask.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably there's a limitation on LinkedIn what CTAs you can put in those buttons. So, it might be a learn more. I mean, I'd just be looking for a more appropriate CTA than sign up. That's a big ask in a social feed on LinkedIn. So that would be my 2 cents here. Sign up is a tough CTA on LinkedIn.
Learn more is an option that it is an available option, and I agree that would be a little less threatening threatening maybe
And I
not be the
wonder
word.
if the start your free trial wouldn't be better. I don't know how that would perform in a LinkedIn button or
It,
not, but
You
I
could
don't
put
think you get
that,
that choice, right?
yeah, no, you can
yeah,
put
you may
that where it
not.
says meeting AI assistant for financial advisors. That we can customize, but the button, there's options you have to choose from. Learn more would probably be.
Yeah,
Um,
or put, as Jason said, put the start your free trial in that text at the bottom
right.
and
And
then sign up. Now they go together to make sense, right?
yes, and my thought here is most likely sign up was chosen because it's in the image as well. But yeah,
Or it's
that's
in the image, or it's in the image because it's one of the few LinkedIn options
could be,
as well. Yeah, yeah.
but people
Um,
don't want to feel like they have to do work.
mhm.
Sign up might feel like I have to go and do something that I just am too lazy to do.
Yeah, try it now is a lot easier than signing up.
Mhm.
All right, so let's look at the second ad. We put this one in here because it's a little bit different where the CTA is to download a white paper, which in general, I like the idea, especially on LinkedIn, because it's a lower ask than trying to set up a demo or a meeting or something like that. But again, like everything else, you're going to have to, for that to be effective, you've got to talk to the problem right away. This is trying to do that. It's just a little weak in doing it. So many financial advisors are already leveraging AI, don't get left behind. There's a little bit of like fear of missing out there, but it's kind of general. So it's not really sticking with me. And then the learn how you can AI power your financial practice really would like more as to why I would want to do that. You got to realize that today, especially with buying committees, like you've got to give people a real reason to make a change. Like, why should we change? And if you don't adequately answer that question, it's going to blow right past most people. So they're not even going to pay attention to this. Plus, there's hesitancy to download white papers and all those kind of things because we don't want the sales calls or, we've been disappointed with what's on the other end. So you got to really compel people to read it. James?
Yeah, this one's a lot easier to look at. The contrast is here, so it's easier to read. So no problems with that. Maybe it's a little less interesting, but I think that's not as important in this context where people are scrolling past. I imagine this white paper's got a bunch of reasons about what it means to AI power your financial practice. So I would say zero on those individual reasons, create a series of ads that give those specific outcomes, those specific arguments for investing in this kind of AI for a financial practice. And you can have more than one ad, there's no limit. And so put those out there with a really sharp message. And then you can double down on ad spending on those which are more effective rather than trying to capture it on in one go.
Yeah. So I have a couple comments on this one here. Visually, I like the highlighted word AI power. That draws your eye in right away. It's a little more standout. And also, again, like James said, the darker background works better with the font here or the color of the font. But going off of comments that were made already here, it's playing off fear, which I like and think is a good tactic to test out. I think it can be stronger by pointing out a little more specifically something that would be painful from this. Don't get left behind on its own. It can maybe increase that FOMO or create that FOMO, fear of missing out, but just seeing that many financial advisors are already leveraging AI, it's kind of vague. What is going to happen to me if I don't do it? How am I going to be left behind? Maybe you can put something in the copy that speaks to that. It would increase that fear of missing out on this. And my second comment here on the copy itself is again with the vague, but we've got the second sentence here that it might compel me to want to download the guide. And I understand that here you don't want to maybe give it all away because you're going to learn everything once you read the guide. But if you give prospects that just one specific point in this copy that's going to make them say, oh, that's actually awesome. I could use that. I do want to learn more about this. I want to go read this guide now. Don't make them have to click on it and download it to then learn about what they're looking for here. Give them something right up front. It's like a crumb, and then they'll follow the trail.
Mhm.
So my concern with all the communications here is it's not telling me as the person deciding on the technology in use at this financial advisory firm, like why I should include this in the tech I give to my advisors. And it seems like the problems to be solved are finding customers, getting them to make investment choices, and keeping them. They fall into those three kind of buckets. Maybe the fourth is generating referrals. So we should be really focused on the problems that advisory firms want to solve. And I think AI in the context of client service can be a really gigantic differentiator. The reporting, the after meeting follow-ups, the documentation of decisions made about how your investments are going to be reallocated or staying the same could be very impressive to the retail brokerage or advisory customer and would cause them to want to stay, move more money to you versus other advisors, or tell their friends. So I just don't think these guys are using their marketing dollars to their best advantage. And it just sort of permeates all of this communication and makes for a less efficient use of those marketing dollars. They're just not driving as much opportunity. I do love the design here, even though it's simpler, less interesting. I think it's probably much more effective because it's so straightforward. I can read it, I know where to click, I know what I'm going to get. So I think in a lot of ways, this is a pretty effective piece of advertising, even though it might be more utilitarian.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the lessons we've kind of learned internally is that dead ahead seems to perform better than some of the pithy or more creative headlines.
Yeah, it does pay sometimes just to be dead ahead about things. Tell people what they're going to get and make it easy to get it.
Certainly worth testing. So. All right, so I think that is all of our submissions. So, of course, if you would like a free messaging and marketing review, we are happy to do that. It is free, like it says here, and we will look at your content just like this, whether it's email messages, websites, advertising, content, and we're going to look at it specifically from the lens of your buyer and from the challenger sale, like how are we getting problem agreement and moving them through the client journey. So just click on this or hit the QR code and we will tackle your specific problem.
Echo something that Ken said, which I think is a common factor across all of these, and something we keep coming back to on these messaging reviews, which is this problem awareness, problem agreement. It's very single-minded, but it really is the most important thing you can communicate in your messaging. That's really what messaging is all about in the B2B tech marketing space, and marketing in generally. But we have customers with problems, challenges that they may or may not be aware of. We need to make sure that they understand those and position ourselves as the best for solving that problem. And everything else is really extraneous. And so really put yourself in the customer's shoes and have that single-minded perspective when trying to pick the language you want to use in all of these communications, website, ads, emails. It's really all it's about.
That's a really good point, and also gives an opportunity for us to talk about our paid messaging platform where we actually go talk to customers and salespeople, but we want to understand really why customers buy from you in the first place. This is a skill that not everybody knows how to do because what you're hearing, like say on sales calls, a lot of time is the rational justifications for why we're looking for a product, and they may not even know the real job to be done, so to speak. And so one of the things that we do when we're crafting a messaging platform or a messaging architecture for a company is that we're going to go try to find, like, say, across 5 or 10 customers, is there something that was going on in the organization or with them personally? Where were they struggling to make progress so much that they had to find a product like yours to solve that problem? That's really what we want to get to at the heart of any research that we're doing with why customers buy.
And actually, I do see a question that came in here. We've got, how do you decide when to pivot messaging or your positioning entirely? Does anyone want to start on that one for us?
My immediate reaction would be like, if you're not getting the results that you'd like, I think it's at least time to look at it. Personally, I think you should always be testing messaging. You should always be talking to customers and continuously homing in on what those issues are and testing against your controls. But if there was any time, right now is the time. We're facing, potential recession. Things are going to tighten in the market. Everything is about efficiency today. And it starts with making sure that your messaging is the most efficient that it can be. So if you're losing people from your website, if people aren't responding to your ads, if your emails are falling on deaf eyeballs, then it's time to look at messaging, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say there's sometimes a moment to pivot messaging when something's changed substantially in your offer. You're bringing something new to market that's going to require a pivot in your messaging. That's kind of obvious. But really, as Jason says, it's like, how do you know if your messaging is working well or not? If you're only ever trying one approach, a singular approach with messaging, then you don't really have any insight, any data to go off, which is going to guide you potentially in a better direction. And so you don't want to be constantly changing what you stand for and doing that in places like your website header. But you do have the opportunity in ads and emails to vary messaging and test out new ideas, new messages. And when you find that there's a substantial reaction that's positive from your audience towards some different messaging, then it's time to take a review and decide, actually, is it time for a broader messaging update? You don't want to be, say, chopping and changing too quickly, but if you can get some insight that keeps you on the right track, it's so much easier to do these days. So definitely a strong recommendation just to try that out.
That reminds me of another symptom that you definitely want to look at. So, as marketers, if you're generating leads and the salespeople are constantly saying these leads suck, that's an indication that you need to look at messaging flat out.
Yeah, I would say also in the sales experience, if you're a company that believes you have product market fit, but the salespeople are telling you that it's getting harder to move people through a journey, that tells you, hey, the product might still be working, but people's concerns are different. So mining those sales calls and the people on the front line of sales to help you understand if things are changing. That's one place. The other thing we recommend a lot of times is have your own podcast, right? If you're constantly talking with the people you'd like to be doing business with, you'll know when their concerns change. And the podcast is a great non-threatening place to do business development kind of work, as opposed to in the sales situation where there's a lot of pressure on both sides. The prospect is under pressure to decide, is this something they want to go forward with? And obviously the sales team is trying to get them from the demo to the contract. So perhaps it might be good to leverage a tool like having your own podcast where you interview your ideal customers in a non-threatening environment. I think it's pretty much time to wrap up this
Okay.
SaaS messaging rescue workshop. This was a lot of fun. I want to say thank you, Jason, for your leadership as always. Rachel, for all your support and insight. Rachel, you're doing a lot of the writing that we have to live or die on, our clients benefit or get hurt by. Thanks for bringing that expertise. And James, likewise, love your perspective. Thanks for joining us from sunny Mexico. And till the next time, hope you enjoyed this workshop and we'll do it again soon.